morning and welcome to Brighter Morning with Bhoe on MCTV, Multicultural TV, and U97.5 FM, Hot Like Pepper Radio, Multicultural Radio. We're glad to have you on board. This is an interesting morning because we had some good news and some bad news yesterday about the virus, the COVID. So let me begin with talking about that. First of all, we have the Delta virus now in Trinidad and Tobago. We knew that this was inevitable. Many people in the health sector spoke about it. The government spoke about it. But it's here. I think that the Ministry of Health and its officials did well to capture the two carriers of the Delta virus. The two persons were contained at the airport and put into quarantine. And so they did not have the opportunity to enter the community and facilitate the spread. Now, this is good for now. We don't know if this same situation is going to prevail every time, but eventually it might get into the community, and that is a very dangerous development. But we commend the ministry officials for being able to contain this by basically quarantining the carriers of this variant in Piaco and making sure that they are isolated from the rest of the population. So the bad news is that the Delta variant is here. The good news is that Ministry of Health officials were able to contain it and to have the carriers of these Delta variants quarantined and separated from the rest of the population. So we are safe for a little while on this particular matter. We can expect, though, that eventually the variant is going to be in the population. The second issue I want to talk about is the 305,000 Pfizer vaccines which were donated by the United States and will be made available for secondary school students. I want to commend the government for their negotiation of this matter and for securing vaccines for school children in the secondary school system, children between 12 and 18. This is a very important development and could facilitate the smooth reopening of schools. And it is my hope that in a respectful and civilized way, that the stakeholders within the education sector will come together, the Ministry of Education, tutor, the boards, the denominational boards of the various schools, the school boards of individual schools, and the principals and teachers in the schools, and the Parent Teachers Association, that they will come together and on a school-by-school basis make sure that our teachers and children are vaccinated. So that is some good news. I want to also take the opportunity to thank the government and people of the United States for making these vaccines possible. Without these vaccines, I think it would have been a high risk to have children go back to schools and congregate in classrooms. The situation is not over yet when the kids are vaccinated, but the children are better off because they will have been vaccinated. And we want to thank the government and people of the United States for making these 305,000 vaccines available, acceptable and palatable to children in order to facilitate the opening of our school system, because the children have lost approximately a year of school. There's a lot of catching up to do, and there's a lot of hard work to be done to keep the education system on track. I suspect, and I want to say this to you, I'm not a medical practitioner. I don't know anything about medicine. But, I have some common sense, I think. And I would think that people, knowing that the variant is around and in the country, it might not yet be in the community, but it is going to get there soon. I would suggest not only that everybody get to a vaccination site and get vaccinated, but I would suggest whether you are vaccinated or not, if you are in an indoor setting, that you put on a mask for your own safety and the safety of others, whether you are vaccinated or not. It's one thing to be outdoors, it's another thing to be indoors. And I would suggest that people do that. As I said, I'm not a health expert, I don't know anything about it, but I have a little common sense. And I want to assure you that I will be wearing my mask indoors. The other issue that I want to mention, and that gives us a segue into our next guest, who is who is the CEO of TTCSI, the Trinidad and Tobago Coalition of Services Industries. And her name is Vashti Guyadeen, Ms. Vashti Guyadeen. So we'll be talking with her a little bit. But before I do that, there seems to be a little conflict about how many businesses are going to be closed between the Confederation of Chambers of Commerce and the Ministry of Trade. I would say that really whether the numbers are exaggerated or not is neither here nor there. The point is that businesses are going to be closed because of the pandemic. Some people just can't get up from what has happened to them. They have gotten a whiplash and they just cannot get their businesses back. And I want to say that the several things that the Minister of Trade said have been done for business, many of them have not worked. I just want to pick out two. I talked about it yesterday. The moratorium on interest, it may have worked the first time for some, but that means accumulated interest after 3 months. And you don't get very far with that. Okay? You can't do that more than once. And the second issue is the issue of the $300 million. The Minister of Finance himself indicated that only less than $100 million of that money had been used, and that they got a lot of problems with businesses that were unregistered for taxation and unregistered for NIS. And that he said that that was one of the problems that they would be trying to solve. I am saying to the government, try and develop some programs. Every business in this country now has the smaller ones, the medium ones, have a liquidity problem. There is high liquidity in the banks still. And we need to match that liquidity in the banks with the liquidity needed by the businesses in this country. And we have to have a workable solution. It has no sense arguing about whether 1,000 businesses are going to close or whether it is 5,000 or whatever. When you don't have the statistics, the government doesn't have the statistics, and the private sector has informal statistics. They're probably both wrong. But the end result is, what is the government going to do to help business to get back on their feet who cannot now get back on their feet because they have a liquidity crisis? That is the question. So I hope the government, the Minister of Trade, would stop quarreling with the business sector, and I hope the business sector will stop arguing about numbers, and that they would sit down and work together and find a way of salvaging the future and the possible sustainability of some of these small enterprises that have been hit. As I speak to you this morning, I want to say that, MCTV carries this program on Amplia 119. That is working. It carries it on Digicel 22. That is working. It carries this program on Airlink 18. It carries this program on Facebook.com, TTMCTV, where you can follow. And it carries this program on 97.5 FM, Hot Like Pepper Radio. At the present time, Flow 114 is not showing the program and has been off the air for MCTV since yesterday evening. I don't know what is the problem, but this is not the first time that this has happened. I want to say to Flow that COVID has created the conditions where we now have a service economy. And Flow is a service business. The second thing is that the service economy in this COVID era and in this fourth industrial revolution road that the world is going to travel and is traveling already depends on technology. And it is unforgivable, in my view, that Flow cannot get its service delivered to this company, and secondly, that it cannot get its technology right to deliver the service. And I ask them, please, to get their act together so that we can put this show on the road. This is Brighter Morning with Bhoe. It is coming to you from MCTV and U97.5 Radio. And if you are looking for Flow 114 and you can't get it on cable, I would ask you, if you want to listen to the program, to tune in to U97.5 Radio so that you can hear at least what we are talking about this morning. But I'm very angry with Flow, and quite frankly, I'm fed up with them because this is not the first time that it has happened. I want to give you the numbers to call. They are 609-6283. And if anybody in Flow has the gumption, they can call and explain what the problem is. 609-6283 and 609-6284. Those are the numbers that you can call this morning to talk. And this morning, as I said, we have Ms. Vashti Guyadeen, the CEO of TTCSI. And let us ask Vashti to come on board and we'll have a little chat with her. Good morning.
Tuari.
Good morning, Ms. Guyadeen. How are you?
I am fine, Dr. Tuari. Nice to see you.
Good to see you too. You look well.
You too. I'm happy that I got a smile on your face. It's always nice to talk to you.
Yes. I just want to disclose that Vashti and I have worked in various capacities during my lifetime. And I want to say that I know her very well. So you wouldn't mind if I call you Vashti, right?
Sure, no problem. Okay. You're my original boss, so.
Yes. This morning we want to talk about the services sector. And TTCSI is the umbrella organization for the services sector in Trinidad and Tobago. Explain a little bit so people understand, because a lot of people hear things but they don't really understand what is happening. And the information isn't given, the clarity is not there, the precision that you need for information is not there. So explain a little bit how TTCSI works as a stakeholder organization, how it is connected with government, and how it represents the private sector and advocates for the services sector within the private sector.
Sure. TTCSI was established way back in 2006. It was back then the CARICOM heads of governments was preparing to negotiate the economic partnership agreement with the European Union. And there were manufacturing associations throughout the Caribbean, but there was not a single entity to negotiate services. So CSIs were established throughout CARIFORUM states. The TTCSI came into being October 11th, 2006, which means this year we celebrate our 15th anniversary. We are not a chamber because people I'm glad you asked this question, but because people feel TTCSI is a chamber of commerce. We aren't a chamber of commerce because individual companies cannot join the TTCSI. So we are the umbrella body for all services organizations and associations. We bring also associations together. We represent them. We lobby on their behalf.
Yes.
We lobby on their behalf. And currently we represent 56 associations, which includes chambers of commerce. And our preliminary research demonstrates that there are 85 active services associations in the country. This means that TTCSI represents more than 65% of the services sector.
Yes, okay, well, thank you for that. So, and explain to the country and to our citizens what services means. What do some of these businesses involve? From the technology sector to ordinary retail, talk about that a little bit. Mm-hmm.
Sure. So services represent a wide range. If we go back to the World Trade Organization classification of services, there are roughly 100 subsectors under services. So you will know how wide that is. We have Real Estate Association as a member, midwives, the more sophisticated services, finance, insurance. Then we go into retail and distribution. We have one of the largest growing sectors is business and services. Even under business and professional services, we have roughly 20 subsectors, which includes accounting, legal services, architectures, consulting services. Cultural and creative industries is another sector. Fashion, music, film. It's pretty large and broad.
Okay, now that's important to understand because the world trades in goods, okay? You have shipping lines that take goods from one country to another and they trade in goods. But services are not on shipping lines and so on. Services are really in the heads of people, their brains. Secondly, they are in the they move technologically. They operate person to person. They offer a high degree of customer service on delivery. And what is happening with COVID now is that a lot of goods are actually being delivered by high levels of services. So you have, for instance, the phenomenon of Amazon abroad, which delivers goods all over the world. But what is key is the service. You have the issue of companies like DHL, etc. What is their business? Their business is logistics and service. Okay? So we need to understand that. So banking is a financial service. Insurance is a financial service and a service to deal with personal protection, etc. But you also have something like tourism, which is part of service industry and which involve a whole range of services from taxis to the hotels to the restaurants, etc. Okay? Now, you mentioned the EPA, Vashti. How we just re-signed agreements in order to renew our opportunities under the EPA with the European Union. And we also, because Britain has now exited from the European Union through Brexit, we signed an equivalent agreement with them. How have we done over the last 10 years or so with the EPA in terms of service exports in Trinidad and Tobago to Europe? How have we done there?
Dr. Tawari, before that question, because you raised a very critical point before, and what you were speaking to before simply relates to the modes of supply.
Yes.
So there are 4 stages of modes of supply in terms of services, and the TTCSI has been actively involved in trying to take our service providers, expand into new markets. And the first critical area for service providers is that they do not see themselves as an exporter. So through this EPA, the Union developed a training program called Services Go Global that is managed by Caribbean Export and the CSIs. And the first step is to identify what is your supply. It could be consumption abroad of your services, which relates to tourism, service or commercial presence. And it's critical for service providers to identify how they are going to supply their services, because that informs their business plan, their marketing plan. So now to segue into the question that you asked for in terms of the economic partnership agreement. Last year, the powers that be did because it was 10 years, they started a review of how effective the EPA has been. And one of the areas, in order to understand how effective it has been on the services side, we need to get data from the firms. That has been a challenge. It's not just for Trinidad and Tobago. Trade and services data is a problem globally. So we have not been able at Tobago to track the successes of our firms in operating in the EU market. However, Jamaica, their service providers and their services firms, whenever they encounter difficulties and obstacles within the European market, they would bring it to the attention of the relevant authority in Jamaica. So we have different case studies coming out from Jamaica, whereby we know that there is a clause on the partnership agreement specifically for cultural and creative industries.
Yeah, there always was.
Yes. So we know some of the challenges that Jamaican creatives have in entering the EU market, but we don't have that data for Trinidad and Tobago. And TTCSI, through PSIP funding, about in 2019, we conducted a survey called a National Services Exporters Survey, where we collected data from potential existing exporters, try to find out what are some of the difficulties they encounter in these markets. So the sample size firms, but again, it's a baseline study. So we are hoping once service providers and firms see the value of giving information, completing surveys, we will get more traction of these reports.
Yes. Okay. So what we have are some videos. Do we have any more clips like that? You can run them while we're talking. What we're seeing there, some of the services businesses in Trinidad and Tobago. But you didn't answer my question how well we are doing in terms of the EPA, in terms of exports. Are we making any headway? I mean, do people in Trinidad and Tobago understand that we have 1.4 million people and the consumer market here is pretty small, and there's no way you can have a thriving business by having that market alone? I mean, you could get by and you could make a small profit and you could look after your family and so on, but you can't build a business like that. Do they understand that in the services sector?
That we are getting them to understand that. And then again, I cannot answer that question because we don't have the data, Dr. Tuari.
All right, you mentioned that, and data is scarce. I mean, is there any way that you can work with your stakeholders to try and get them to understand the value of this? I think it's critical. We have a data problem throughout the country. The CSO, I don't know what has happened to it. There is no up-to-date data on employment. There is very little data that is current. You can't get any information from anywhere within the last 2 or 3 years about what's happening in any sector. Because of that, some of the numbers given by various agencies are very suspect. It really is a problem. And you cannot make decisions in the business world today. You cannot make decisions as a government. You can't organize policy. You cannot understand a framework for development if you don't have statistical data. You need to know who people are, what they do, where they live, where they work, how do they do this, when do they do this, why do they do this. You need to understand those 6 basic questions statistically so that you can make decisions. More and more, the economic thinking today is about behavioral economics. What causes people to behave in the way that they do that has an economic effect? And, you know, I mean, this country is going to cripple itself if it does not have the capacity to generate the data that we need. A small country of 1.4 million people, and we can't get the data. I mean, really. So
Dr. Tuari, that gets into how we collect data. And
yes.
Again, you brought up the issue about the use of technology. So TTCSI have conducted a number of surveys since April of 2020. And again, you need to use the technology. Business people will not complete a physical survey, which is roughly 15 to 20 pages. You need to make it user-friendly. So this is what we have been doing at TTCSI.
No, but more than that, you don't need to ask people 15 pages of questions.
Exactly.
You know, you get a handful of questions. These things are strategically done. People sit down and organize what they want to get out of the questionnaire. And they ask you 10 questions and they call that George. And on the basis of that, they can extrapolate a lot of information. You don't have to know who is your mother and your grandmother. I mean, it is irrelevant. You know? Okay. All right now. So, you know, when I was Minister of Planning, we started something called, we got a $20 million loan to get the services industries of Trinidad and Tobago to export, especially the technology-driven services industries. What has happened to that? Have we made any progress on that?
As far as I know, that program was disbanded. This was before I came on at the TTCSI. And we are really hoping, we had conversations with the IDB, and we really are hoping that something like this could be restarted. Well, because a similar program was started in Jamaica at about the same time, and Jamaicans have gone way ahead. Those startup firms are now exporting.
You know, I mean, I really don't understand how we want to get ahead if we don't want to do things that allow us to get ahead. You don't get ahead because you feel like getting ahead, you know. You have to put things in place, infrastructure, systems, connectivities, in order to make those kinds of things possible. I'm very sorry and sad to hear that that program has been disbanded, because that had the capacity for generating significant exports in the services sector. Now, recently there have been a little controversy about how many businesses are not going to reopen when the retail sector comes on stream next Monday. From your understanding, from your stakeholders, your clients, what is happening in the business sector? Do we have a large fallout from the business sector?
We don't have any data supporting that claim. What we have done, we have drilled deeper into subsectors. For instance, with the tourism services, tour operators, they have been out of commission since March of last year. Earlier this year, when TTCSI, following our AGM, a new president was elected. We had stakeholder meetings with our members, and coming out of those meetings, the firms within the tourism sector were telling us that if borders don't open, roughly 63% of their businesses would close. Event planners are another sector that has been heavily impacted. And a small percentage of event planners have been able to pivot in terms of offering virtual events.
Yeah. What about, I mean, do you think that the services sector, I mean, I suspect that some of the services sector is going to try to get back on its feet, but I mean, because of the length of time that people have had to close, because of the expenditures involved, because of the no income situation, because of the lack of liquidity, it may be very, very hard for some of them to be able to get operational again. I mean, do you get that feeling from your businesses? I mean,
yes and no.
Who is enthusiastic in your business sector, the business sector that you cater for, the services sector of Trinidad and Tobago? The big companies, the banks and so on, the insurance companies, they can survive. There's no question. But the smaller entities, I mean, how are they viewing Monday the 16th? Are they enthusiastic? Are they ready to go? I mean, how are they going to deal with this matter?
Okay. Monday the 16th, TTCSI do not have the retail and distribution sector. What we have, a sector that has been gearing up to open is what we classify as personal services. These are barbers, hairdressers, nail techs. So to go back to here, it's not doom and gloom for everybody. There are some sectors that have looked and they have started doing their own strategic planning. And I will tell you, when I started here, when I came on board at the TTCSI back in 2018, it was the selling to get people to do this Services Go Global program. Next month, we are going to graduate 139 persons. And those graduates came from last year to June of this year. We introduced a Lawrence Proceed Award, and we normally, between 2019 and 2020, we had roughly 8 persons submitting, completing their export plan. This year, we have more than 28 plans.
Okay.
So, yes, there are difficulties, but firms are service providers specifically within the business and professional services sector of Tuareg. They are looking at opportunities, and they are looking at opportunities, joint ventures with other Caribbean islands.
Okay. Well, that is good. Any collaboration that makes the opportunities for market. You know, I mean, one of our great economists in this region, Arthur Lewis, had a short sentence in one of his pieces, which people might do well to remember. And that short sentence was, everything begins with the market. So you work backwards from the market in order to build and generate the capacity for business engagement. So you start with the market. I don't know if people understand what happened, let's say, with the methanol industry in Trinidad and Tobago. While the first plants in the country were being built, the market had already been secured for the supply of methanol. So the people who were buying methanol had established contracts with the methanol industry that wasn't yet in existence in Trinidad and Tobago, waiting for the plants to begin to produce methanol. And that is a practice that has gone on in the world over and over again. Everything begins with the market. It is not operations. Operations are meant to serve the market and the customers in your market base. Okay? All right. So what are the prospects then for taking advantage of the EPA, taking advantage of export markets? We have a number of trade arrangements that we've secured with some of the Central American countries over many administrations. We also have arrangements with countries like Colombia, which are workable. We have arrangements in the Central American region with not only DR, Dominican Republic, but also with Guatemala. We have special arrangements with Panama, etc. I mean, what are we doing about these markets? And of course, there are opportunities, as I said, in the EPA. That's all of Europe, including the UK. And you are talking also about the United States. I mean, what are the possibilities?
So, Dr. Chouari, you'll understand that on the services side, services firms, providers are not as organized as the manufacturing sector. So at TTCSI, we have stepped back and we say, how do we help these firms? Because one, they do not know how to get the benefits of a trade agreement. So we looked at the Services Go Global. That That program takes those firms through a 3-week process. And within that process, we realize that these firms need coaching. They need mentors. So we put forward a program, an accelerator program, which is an advanced services global program called Gateway to Trade. Gateway to Trade is going to commence in October of this year. It's a 9-month program. We are going to take 80 firms who have demonstrated export potential. We are going to work with them for 9 months. And to answer your question, part of that program involves going to market, making the necessary market connections. We are working with Export TT, that's their area of specialization in terms of doing virtual trade missions, setting up B2B business meetings with these firms, and more preparing them for those B2B meetings. Part of this this process involves developing their company profiles. All of these profiles is going to be posted on an exporter's portal, which will be on the TTCSI's website, which has an e-commerce in it where they can market and sell their services. So it is a start, but it is a critical start for the services sector.
Okay, you know the manufacturers have set targets for achievement in terms of growth. You know, they want to double the number of the amount of exports that they do. They want to increase the number of employees, etc., tied to the export growth. The country has a problem of foreign exchange. Have you all set targets like that, or are you going to?
Yes, we are going to, because those 80 firms that I spoke about, they have not been selected as yet.
Okay.
So we know right now in the country, we know who are the top 150 manufacturers. TTMA could say that to double export, that will come from the top 40 or 50 manufacturers in food and beverage, and they understand that. We are trying to do that at the services side now.
Okay, so there is need for a lot of organization in the services sector then. And people need to understand that while they build their individual businesses, you also need to build cooperation among businesses and collaboration and create the conditions for business-to-business collaboration in order to achieve higher goals. And one of the problems in this country is that people only understand their business in a very selfish way. And I mean, let's face it, every business is part of a system. You are connected to a range of stakeholders, and you've got to cooperate and collaborate, or else you will simply be left out. And you will find it very, very hard in order to progress. So that is why people are talking now about what they call about an ecosystem. So every industry that you are in, every service that you are in is part of a wider ecosystem of stakeholders who are interdependent on one another. So I think a lot of education needs to take place that helps people to understand what is important to them strategically. And maybe that's one of the things that you might do sector by sector with these people. What do you think?
Definitely. And one of the things that we realize is that, so as I said before, we represent 56 associations. But pre-COVID, those associations were not collaborating or didn't see the need to build alliances. So in April or roughly May of last year, we brought together the architects, the realtors, and the Society of Planners to see how, and we termed it building alliances for recovery. At that point in time, globally, malls were being closed. They were reconfiguring malls in terms of apartment buildings. So getting these three critical associations together, we start planting the seeds to how they can collaborate. So we have across the board where we have brought together the tourism, the tour operators, the event planners, and much more of that has to take place. You do not operate in a silo anymore.
All right. We're going to have to close up now, Vashti. Is there anything critical that you want to say at this point? We're going to have to close. We're going to have to go to...
I would like to... It speaks to what you opened the program with in terms of data collection. The only means that we could get out of this is if the firms in the private sector, the services firm, complete those surveys, give us the data. Once we have that data as a country, as the private sector, it can inform evidence-based policies.
All right.
So it's important to get data.
My next guest after the news is Professor Anthony Clayton from the University of the West Indies in Mona. He is a person who is not only very steeped in sustainable development issues, but he's steeped in foresighting and future studies, looking at the future and what is happening, and we're going to have a discussion about him, with him. And one of the things that I'm sure that he's going to say is the convergence of all of these issues, the technology, the service, the need for efficiency, effectiveness, the need for sustainability, is creating an economy that is going to leave us way, way, way behind unless we are able to get up and cooperate and collaborate. So I hope that business people who are watching and who are listening on 97.5 would pay attention to the discussion with Professor Clayton, which comes next after the news. And let's see where the world is going and how we can basically latch on to where the world is going, and more than that, get our business organized so that we can do something here for our people, for our employees, and so on. And I know you were involved in the vaccination drive. You all contributed towards that. And what's your position on the workplace vaccination? Just a quick one, because we've got to go now.
I vaccinate to operate.
Vaccinate to operate.
Operate.
It's necessary. Okay. Thank you very much, Vashti Guyadeen, CEO of TTCSI. Thank you, my viewers and listeners, for watching this morning. I am told from some phone calls that people are seeing Flo on 114. I'm very grateful for that, and I say thanks to Flo. And I'm very glad that they are back on board and they got it. And could Flo just get the technology right and keep the station going? Because, you know, that's how we communicate with our viewers and our customers. All right, thank you very much. We go on now to the news with Chanel Alsuran.